Welcome back, one and all. We are coming into picks and bans of game number 2. And a lot's going to change. I think Istanbul Wildcats, look, will give you game 1 and say, look, you were downloading your opponent, that's fine. But their draft needs to start facilitating this hyper carry in the bot lane.
Just get a front line.
Yeah.
That's all you really need. And again, just having a little bit of protection for her. We talked about, Tam Kench's, the Thresh obviously was banned away, but at least getting something that can keep Bao safe.
I think what this game was from the Wildcats was a little bit of an exploration in a best-of-5 setting to say, actually, can we get away with not having that and just relying on winning lanes and relying on Parus getting out onto the map early on the Nautilus, which he did do. Now, the answer is, if you're exploring those questions, is no, you can't do that for free. You can't stop kind of... you can't give that kind of greed over, and as you said, if you're playing around this Jinx, which you've done the whole tournament, you need to pay more respect for what SK Prime can do with their aggressive go buttons.
To see where they want to go for it. The Kalista still going to be banned. The Rakan, the Gragas. We're pretty much going to see, I would argue, some of the most, pretty much the same bans coming out from here. These are just the big power picks. The Kalista being a very big pocket for Keduii.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's kind of a, well, we're literally sticking to the exact same for once for Istanbul Wildcats, so kind of saying, look, it was slightly broke, but we don't fix it, and we'll see if we can actually try and come through here. I think the big one is the fact that they have swapped over to the blue side here, and getting a little bit more of that control is going to be very important, especially when it comes towards these early picks. Again, I think even taking away something like the Wukong for Elramir could be very, very important. Or, again, I mean, an Annie, very strong pick in the current meta, hasn't been really picked up by the squad, but something you could definitely use to leverage.
Yeah, I think what we've seen in EMEA Masters is kind of different series having different power picks kind of slip through the bans because they have a different read on what's going to be powerful in terms of the powerful roles. I think in this series, support is going to be a very powerful role as well. We saw the Thresh first round ban from SK Prime in game 1. That's not going to be taken away in this game. And of course that Wukong, which is very powerful for Lurox in game 1, now picked up by Elramir.
The question now is, like, what do you want to try and respond to it with? We've seen things like an Ahri Lee Sin if you really want to try and go for that, or you can just go for the Maokai yourself. Zeri going to be taken for Keduii. Again, we haven't seen him play either the Jinx or the Aphelios at all in the EMEA Masters. We've seen it locally where he's like 1 out of 2 or 1 for 3 on the Jinx. I can't remember his Aphelios win rate, but they're not great. So I'm not. Oh, he's 50% on the Aphelios actually. So in the grand scheme of things, the Zeri has been way stronger for him. We'll have to see if this Lee Sin will be locked in.
So going for the skirmishing power, getting themselves in a position that they can go for those 1v1 skirmishes, with Lurox now having a much more proactive pick.
Lurox, of course, had a heck of a history coming in from the Prime League. Last split was on Unicorns of Love Sexy Edition. Won with them last summer and reached quarterfinals. Going to step beyond that in this spring with their rivals SK Prime, and typically he's done that by having aggressive early jungle matchups. However, as you were saying, Rob, it was really about, in terms of Lurox and FEBIVEN comboing up, having that Ahri alongside has very much helped them. So Wildcats take the Ahri away.
Yeah, question marks now. Lissandra, maybe, but not great into the Xayah. Cassiopeia could be something that we get. Febi has brought it out in the past, but curious to see if he wants to try and go for, would lead to a very strong team fight, but also the opportunity here to, I was going to say try and go for your support, but instead they're going to go for the LeBlanc, a bit of an old school matchup.
Something they can always kind of go toe-to-toe with. Again, kind of becomes an interesting one in the mid lane. You've got kind of 2 very similar champions in terms of how they want to play out and move around the map. They don't want to be spending too long into that mid lane. And I gotta say, you got 2, again, it's kind of a, despite us being in a very hyper carry, AD carry meta, or at least, kind of focus, it is a lot about that mid-jungle combination. Having that strong duo can be huge.
It's really important to get something working in that mid-jungle if you want to have the first move on the map. It has felt like you push in through mid or you skirmish through mid and then you end up somewhere else. Even if you start bringing your jungle straight down towards that bot lane, a lot of those fights can be factored into with mid lane having that first roam, particularly with a volatile matchup like Ahri versus LeBlanc. That will be very important to track again too.
And I think as well, if you can get that lead in the mid lane here for Istanbul Wildcats, you have a much safer game plan here. You've got good push over the bot side, you've got good push in the mid as well, and it should lead you to a position where you're not falling behind to, Lurox being able to roam around the map as effectively as he did in the last game, bringing Prime into the equation as well. I imagine we'll see the Olaf ban coming through here again for Istanbul Wildcats, just trying to make sure they have a good matchup in that top side. And then the question mark is, okay, I think you take the support here, leave that counter pick then for Gen X in the top lane.
However, one of the big things from game 1 was actually the support counter pick. Yeah. So now actually maybe to say, hang on, Parus, really, really important in the run that Istanbul Wildcats have had so far. But now we have ourselves, potentially, another AP carry top lane in the Ryze.
And he's actually played it back domestically as well. Like, this is something that Destroy is more than happy to bring out, and it's actually something we saw a lot in the LPL. Like, trying, well, not the Ryze specifically, but control mages in the top lane against the Kennen, trying to keep this Kennen in check, pushing the wave. And it's something that Kennen doesn't like, is champions that match him for range, because he doesn't really have that mobility. And Ryze is definitely someone that you can push the wave against, but also set up very well for ganks from Elramir.
Last pick now for Prime, support counter pick held on to for all this time. We've seen a number of pretty decent Braum counter picks across the history of League of Legends. It seems to be a little bit more niche nowadays, but particularly when you have a number of lower range champions, the Nautilus in a bit of an awkward lane matchup this time. Maybe that can once again stop Braum and Parus having an easy platform to impact the game.
I like the Braum as well coming into this one here. Kind of gives you that kind of look. You can look at everybody in the side of the Istanbul Wildcats. Very short range. Got to be very close to everybody else in order to kind of put their damage down. But the Braum up, you're going to have to try and find unique angles now from the Istanbul Wildcats to make this composition do as much damage as we know it can.
Yeah, this should be, though, this feels like Istanbul Wildcats have come in with this as a plan, right? Because you think, okay, we're going to leave Kennen to go through the ban phase. They wanted to bring out the Ryze in response now. I think it should give them relatively decent control over side lanes and the fact that Ryze can push. But it does feel like when you come towards a team fight, Ryze will be somewhat tanky and can play a little bit kind of that mid-range, but he's not really going to be a frontline again. At least this time, Xayah, a little bit more self-reliant in the way she has the ultimate and the self-peel, but it still feels like when it comes towards the big old team fights, you got a lot more opportunities for SK to find squishy members with this Kennen.
Also think where they have an opportunity, and this would be a hell of a way to start game 2, especially after that shellacking that was game 1. I wonder if we see a level 1 plan, especially when you have a couple of these flippy lanes. We talked about mid lane, quite important. They've got a Kennen versus a Ryze. Also, not the tankiest members ever. You have that Braum.
I'm going to just say it. Braum is #1 when it comes to level 1s in my eyes. So.
And essentially, if you have someone like that Lee Sin, land a Q afterwards with that slow, there's a chance you can get yourself a particularly good inroad very, very early on.
We'll have to wait and see. But we are jumping on the riff for game number 2. It is the Prime League SK Primers coming in here with the first advantage. They got themselves the first win. Game 2, they can get themselves one more closer again. This is kind of the thing. You're in the semifinals now. You're 2 best-of-5s away from claiming the EMEA Masters Championship. Istanbul Wildcats, it's your first time here. It's the first time we've seen the TCL in this tournament, and you want to be putting down a big stamp of authority that you're here to play.
Yeah, especially when it's the caliber of opponents that Istanbul Wildcats have gone up in the past against, especially when you look towards like international tournaments. This is where they want to stamp their authority and say, hey, look, we are the new guys, but we're the big players here. We want to make sure that we're coming in and taking over. Now, it has been very good for Istanbul Wildcats, the favorites coming into this matchup. We'll have to see if they can bounce back, though, coming into the second game.
And actually, just quickly double hitting on that again. I mean, they've been at 3 international tournaments before: MSI 2021, MSI 2022, and then Worlds 2022 as well. Now, they didn't end up progressing through the first stages of those tournaments, but just being there is a very important thing for fans of the org, for players of the org, and the org itself, getting used to these higher tiers of competition. Now, EMEA Masters, their first crack at the ERLs. They managed to take down, of course, one of the biggest contenders in this tournament, LDLC, coming in from the LFL as their first seed, very importantly so. Now they have to face the Prime League, see if they can deal them a blow.
See what I'm going to go for now. And again, I don't expect us to have too many early games. We saw in the last game, everyone's kind of happy to kind of get in through get their feet settled in their lanes. No one really kind of going for. And the big thing we saw from the Istanbul Wildcats in that first game was very good late jungle vision control. They were able to keep an eye on where Lurox was going, and I want to see if they're able to continue to do that coming into this game too.
It is actually going to be a little bit difficult though, because I'm surprised that Kofte didn't opt in towards the electrocute. Oftentimes you'll see when you are up against the LeBlanc, you take the electrocute just so you can go for trades a bit more effectively, but FEBIVEN managed to pop the early bone plating and then is now just trading with the auto attacks to make sure that he's winning this matchup now.
Now, of course, we talked about this early matchup being pretty awkward in that sense, but I think the Spellbook's a bit of a concession to say, look, I'm going to have to face that Kennen at some point. If I can pick up that exhaust, which of course Parus hasn't picked up in that bot side, that was something that we called about in that game 1, maybe that can help. Of course, someone like a Yone can't exactly take that Spellbook, already having a little bit more ability to do so.
Elramir finding himself in this top half of the map, but just kind of positioning himself for maybe a little bit of a red buff steal. They haven't found where Lurox is yet, but with the 2 wards, one on the Raptors and now one on the red.
They found a machine.
They did find him. Now it's going to be good information coming in here. Lurox has used his Q, and you can see that Elramir is just trying to see if he can maybe use a couple more cooldowns before he goes for anything. Jumps in. He doesn't know if he can go for that full kind of setup.
Smite
You do not
fight.
have, I was going to say Smite fight, but you don't have priority. Doesn't matter. Elramir gets himself in.
Yeah, nice job by Elramir there just to make sure that he's able to play off. Destroy's pushing the top side. We already kind of touched on this. The fact that the Ryze has that range, really good wave control as well, just sucks for Kennen in general. And now Elramir are going to play off it again and try and get in the face of Lurox once more.
At least try and blow that smite, which he has done there. And now, particularly with Xayah having much better wave control very early on compared to the Zeri, if you go now and you kind of cross map back over to your own red buff, you're not really going to get the same kind of contest. Parus is pushed in into the enemy jungle, got a ward there too. That means that you're probably getting a double red buff steal.
Oh, aggressive move forward there, trying to get the concussive blows proc. They'll get 3 on each of the bot laners of the Istanbul Wildcats, but they shall not proc any of them there. And we obviously didn't see it, but a bad trade coming out for the SK Prime bot lane. It is kind of to be expected. The Braum isn't really going to be winning you the lane in that regard, unless there's some kind of external threat from the jungler mid coming in to
You know the way you win
happen.
that lane is you just hope the enemy support gets so impatient that they hook into you and they get EW stunned. That's the way you win that lane and pretty much nothing else.
Curious to see now what's going to happen though with Lurox. Doesn't get the top crab. You can see that one goes to Elramir. He's now on reset, but you do have push now coming through for Kofte, who TP'd back in towards the mid lane. Febi needs to do a similar story. So opportunity here for Kofte to roam with the level advantage down to this bottom side and actually help out Elramir to get that second scuttle. Needs to be a little bit quick though.
Not going to happen.
Doesn't look like they're going to contest.
No, they got the reset on bot side, so knowing that SK Prime had a better one there as FEBIVEN moving forward here. We're going to see the charm come out, but it is eaten by the Unbreakable. And Lurox just kind of putting down some feelers to see where exactly everyone is kind of being right now as Elramir finally goes and takes away his own red buff.
Which now means he'll have red buff for an extended period of time. Of course, having red buff at very early levels, very, very important. Does mean you give up a bit of this bot side vision. Does mean, though, you have a bit more fighting ability should SK Prime look to get into a lane, go onto this dragon. Wildcats should have a bit more platform for that.
Again, not really a lot to kind of talk about, really. This is kind of more what we expect to see for both these teams. We saw it in game 1. They're very happy to kind of just, kind of take the laning phase as it comes. It's when we start to see this Dragon and Rift Herald trade, it's when I would expect these two teams to kind of ignite, because that's what SK Prime did in game number 1. They went for that big fight and then got the ball rolling.
Yeah, so with Elramir recalling means that we're unlikely to see anything happening around this Dragon at least, so it would be Herald, which would be the first objective up where we potentially see a fight. And very important for SK Prime to kind of get themselves up to that point where they can start contesting these neutral objectives again. That was a big factor in that last game, which forced Wildcats into very awkward moments. Good charm in that mid lane. But it's also a really big factor because the Wildcats, we've talked about them dropping a game here and there and maybe taking some time to get steadied. SK Prime do not want to let them do that. They want to get a better foothold in this series.
Yeah, and they really want to try and make sure that they're able to actually set up well into this mid-game. You got the Lee Sin, you got the LeBlanc. These are definitely picks that you can do a lot of work on, especially if you can get into the face of the enemy or even try and find some picks in the enemy jungle. But Elramir has been doing a reasonably good job of trying to track Lurox as he moves across. With the Dragon yelling out as well, they'll know exactly where he is.
He's right here!
So Elramir going to see if he can respond, move in towards the Raptors that have just respawned, try and take away this top side before Lurox can really get back there.
Well, already FEBIVEN kind of recognizing this and calling the bluff, saying, look, I know that we haven't got any presence on that top lane. Top lane is as well kind of being pushed in. So FEBIVEN, he's just trying to be a little bit of a nuisance here. Kofte gonna dodge out from the chains, just get hit by a sigil of absolute madness. And yeah, I mean, there's not really a lot the LeBlanc can do, to be perfectly honest. We'd be giving up too much in her own lane to try and just contest these Raptors.
It's also just you're in a 1v2, right? Lurox on his wolves knows that he's not going to be able to transition across. He's down a level as well because of all the plays that have been happening on that end. Elramir just about to tick over to level 6 actually if he steals away this top camp, whereas you've only just hit the level 5 for Lurox.
Maybe a dive coming in this top side. They know Elramir is here, but you can see that Lurox sprinting towards this top side.
It'd be really dangerous to dive, though. You don't have any AP built up on this Ryze yet. You've got a little bit of wave clip, but with flash and ult from Genax, good chance to outplay.
Oh, they're looking for him. The flash is good from Elramir, but does he get stunned? Yes, he does. And he goes a little bit too far forward. First blood again to SK Prime.
Again, that is a really over-aggressive play from the Wildcats. You don't have damage on that Ryze, and if Destroy's not in the right position, he's not helping you out very quickly in these plays.
It was greedy. Elramir, he had the level 6 nearly there. You can see I'm pretty, like he's literally just one tick away from the level 6. Remember the purple bars just beside the characters will show there, and if he'd gotten it, that's where you could turn around with Destroy, but the fact he couldn't quite get that level 6 meant that they were able to turn it around with a great play from Genax.
Saw a little bit of this throughout the entire tournament, which is when we have seen the Wildcats lose their footing a bit in games, it's not because they don't have vision control, it's not because they haven't done that first step, it's just capitalizing on that first step. And again, I think some impatience comes in here. They had that vision already, they just didn't quite know how to capitalize on it.
I mean, the big thing as well is that it's you know, as much as it was Istanbul Wildcats getting a little bit greedy, great reads from SK Prime. They kind of recognize that, look, we know we don't have the priority top side, so they kind of move in, confirm that the Wukong is there, and then they just keep themselves in the loop and say, look, we can make this work.
And now they have no priority top. They still have Lurox on level 5, so Rift Tower will go across to Elramir. Just a nice call here to say, hey, look, we got the push that we need. We have the level 6 advantage, so there's not really much you can do. Even Parus as well, hitting that level 6 in the bot side as well, means he's become a very big threat. Even in the mid lane, Kofte getting pushed in by Febi as well. Curious to see if Febi can try and make some plays with Lurox here. Lurox spotted on the ward though.
Chain lands, that's where the threat really comes in. That chain lands, Lee Sin gets his full combo on target. He's hopped into the brush.
They know he's here, but they're going to look for it anyway. They kick over the wall, they kind of give him an exit strategy as well. The charm is good, and now Elramir just can't be touched. That Cyclone finally coming in, and it shows you how difficult it is to jump on the Wukong.
That was the most awkward timing for Lurox to enter that lane. You can see that the Ignite was switched over to on the spellbook by Kofte. They choose to try and take out Elramir, but he has that clone, has the extra survivability. And now you've got that kill going over to the mid jungle of the Wildcats.
Also, Febi just used his full combo, so there's nothing left for the LeBlanc to try and follow up now. Kofte.
A lot of damage here. The electrocute damage coming in off the back of that as well. As you can see, FEBIVEN is constantly harassing flash for flash. Great move there by Febi as he just kind of gains momentum in this lane now. And again, similar to what we saw in game number 1.
Yeah, I mean, really nice job there from Febi. Nearly managed to get it, but Lurox on a ward, so they spot him the entire way. So there's no surprise from Elramir that he's in the bush. But like Febi had just used everything, so there's no real combo here available for him to actually do it. You can see one Sigil of Malice, wait, even gets knocked out of the distortion as well. Like there was just nothing left in the tank for the mid laner of SK.
Yeah, awkward timing there from Lurox. A little bit different from what we've seen in the game so far. Lurox has actually been pretty much in the right place at the right time, so important to kind of break that trend from SK Prime. And now we have ourselves a little bit more of an even game. We have, of course, that Herald still to be placed from the Wildcats. Have to see where that will be put down. SK Prime have to defend against that power play.
Ronove just finished up here for destroying the top side, so he's happy as Larry, stacking up as much as he physically can.
How happy is Larry?
Larry's very happy from reports
I'm
I've heard.
Happy that Larry is happy.
Happy Larry is a... I'm pretty sure they just said happy as Larry because it sounds like happy.
What if Larry's actually miserable and we've just never known it this whole time?
Look, I don't need you to get super existential
Maybe
and
someone out there,
psychological.
that sounds like a writing prompt where someone is literally out there to find Larry and make them happy or unhappy.
Yeah,
you get to determine the happiness of many people.
Someone just didn't know it was sarcasm, but what is not sarcastic is the way Istanbul Wildcats are starting to move in towards this area. Like Lurox is definitely feeling the pinch here again. Behind on the levels, you can see nearly level 8 here for Elramir as he's going to just back away, but Istanbul Wildcats having much more control in this early game than they did in the last one.
Dragon spawning in 10 seconds. Of course, that will be a big thing to fight around. Chemtech Dragon being put in the first tier means that they're not available for that Soul. Chemtech Soul, one of the few ones that you want to take up early. Wildcats onto it for the first time, looking to break the Dragon stacking from SK Prime.
I mean, it's very easy for them to do. You've got the Gale Force built up here for Bao. You haven't had a chance to reset here for Keduii, so he's not really at a point of power to kind of get this kind of, you know, big team fight they want. And this is just Istanbul Wildcats are slowly turning the gears a little bit. 1,000 gold lead, equaling the Dragons. This is a lot more kind of composed for them comparatively to game 1. They're feeling a little bit more comfortable.
And this is where I would have liked to see SK Prime try and make some sort of cross map, like move Febi up towards the top side. And look, we all know Destroy has his flash, he has his ult. That's not the point. It's about making him use them.
Yep. If
he doesn't have flash for Rift Herald fights that's in 2.5 minutes, suddenly Gen X has a much easier time in finding these priority targets and trying to pick them off.
That's the extra factor though in these cross maps. Need to be so careful because I mean Wildcats haven't dropped their own Herald yet. They haven't dropped that first one, so if you're gonna go commit to one side of the map, need to be very, very sure you're gonna be able to defend or at least get something of equal value to a big Herald push somewhere else. Elramir is spotted out. FEBIVEN spots him again, and that is a blind dodge, we'll call it, from FEBIVEN.
The more he practices, the luckier he gets. That's what I find as well. But
he's practiced a lot. He's been around for a while.
He has definitely been. Has plenty of leagues. Know exactly where he's kind of going with those ones. But you got to use the Rift Tail pretty damn soon. Elramir kind of sprinting up towards this top side because he's only got a couple of seconds left on that one. They want to try and confirm this tower, but remember last time we saw it drop down like this, it wasn't the most ideal, and you can see them right there. They weren't looking for a little bit of a fight. They're looking to see if they can just make sure that Shelly gets her bot.
Okay, mid and support both roaming towards this top side. I don't think Wildcats are looking for a fight, but they will have numbers there if SK try and respond.
Yeah, I mean, just punishing the fact that, again, Destroy has so much control over this top side. Genex now, we'll find Elramir. I don't think you want to really commit to this as SK Prime, though, because, again, you do have that Rift out in minute 30. I think you're going to be in a much better spot if you try and play for that objective, especially if you could try and get this mythic completed on towards Genex in the top lane, but he is 1,000 gold behind. I think he should have it off reset, though.
There's not been any real big spark from SK Prime this game. There hasn't been that moment where they've been able to pick up 1 or 2 kills, get the summoners off them, reset the momentum of the game. And it does feel like it has just been the Istanbul Wildcats just slowly taking everything that they want. Like, again, they're happy to let this Ryze stack on the sideline. They're happy to let this Xayah get the 2-3 items and then go for the kind of big late game team fight.
And also just on individual levels as well, Wildcats doing much, much better. We haven't seen Destroy upset very early. Of course, he was, what, 0-3 by this time last game? Wasn't particularly the happiest game for the Gangplank.
He was not Larry.
He would, or maybe he was if Larry was indeed unhappy. You know what? I'm frightened by the implications of that. But either way, Destroy is certainly feeling much happier than he was before. The extra gold is going to fund him towards near enough that Seraph's coming up. Having an early Seraph's Embrace is going to be very important, because if you look to burst him out on a side lane with Genex and Lurox, or maybe even FEBIVEN walking forward, then extra shield could be the extra difference maker to help him survive.
Kofte, fine really, has the W passive move speed. Does use the summoner heal that he had in his back pocket, so even if he did get caught out there, to be honest with you, he was pretty fine to make sure he wasn't ever going to get caught.
Now, as we start to look towards this Rift Tile, though, I'm curious to see exactly what the game plan is going to be. You can see LeBlanc starting to see what she can achieve here. You've already got the Elramir moving down. I wasn't sure if we're going to get Ryze moving down towards his the mid lane direction as well, but not going to be the case. Istanbul Wildcats with full vision control and River, though, are going to be in a very good spot as they move into this.
Okay, so control wards littering this top side of the river means that it's a little harder for someone like LeBlanc to jump forward. Of course, particularly when we see champions like this LeBlanc, you look for how much poke they can get down, how much damage they can get from hopping over a wall. When you have a rune prison and something like the hook flying out in very quick, short order as well, FEBIVEN can have to struggle a little bit to find himself best damage in these situations.
Best damage like best girl.
What?
I don't know, my brain went somewhere completely different there.
He knows that there's like another...
Good boy? Are we talking about dogs? I'm so confused.
Don't talk about Lurox like that. Yeah. We're talking about our dog junglers. He's done very well this series.
Well, still, it was a series so far. Elramir not quite getting caught out there, but again, this is just kind of little by little, bit by bit. You can see the Istanbul Wildcats just kind of taking everything they want. We're going to have another dragon spawning in a minute's time. It is an Ocean Soul. It does feel like, again, for SK Prime, they're finding it hard to figure out how they kind of, bring everything together with this.
That's the big problem here, is that the main focus of this SK Prime one has been, well, Prime, Lurox, and Febi, right? How can these three interact? Push and boss, Prime can't move. Lurox doesn't win in the 1v1, and you're not getting Febi with the control over mid lane, so it becomes very hard for them to actually link up. And as well, with Genex now being pushed out of the top side, you're not getting the opportunity for the Kennen to roam. Istanbul Wildcats now set up in mid, means that they can enter fairly handily in towards Dragon, with the Rift Tower popped in mid as well.
Yeah, you got the counterweight, so that Herald is going to stop SK Prime from making plays elsewhere. They need to focus on this mid lane, potentially even getting a charge in towards this inner turret, but Genex turns up.
No vision. This is a little bit of a trap. Keduii is just left on his own, isolated. He will flash, and he will just jump straight back out on top of him. Parus getting that kill there with the Ignite. Now it's a 5v4 in favor of the Istanbul Wildcats. And SK, they didn't dot their I's, they didn't cross their T's, and now they're losing everything. Prime will drop down, and that's just going to be so much more gold, so much more control now going over the side of the Istanbul Wildcats.
Nobody checked the brush. Nobody knew that the enemy was waiting there, and Keduii pays the price. Really good job and really good patience, honestly, from the Istanbul Wildcats, waiting for Keduii that they spot on the wall.
You know what? This is a bit of a deep hit. This reminds me of one of the most famous plays we saw in LoL Esports history, is when GT took down SKT in like 2019, where they waited for the front line to walk past. Just thought there'd be a juicier fish coming away just past that point, and it's the AD carry, catch him out in that pixel brush, and now Destroy gonna get away from the top side.
Oh man, they just had nothing to keep him there. Destroy doesn't even have to use his flash, and he gets himself out willy-nilly. 4,000 gold lead, 2 dragons to 1, and this is why I said we'll let Istanbul Wildcats let go of that first game, because when they come into game number 2, it's like a completely different team.
And I think this is something where you can kind of go back and say, okay, well, we brought out the LeBlanc. Has it really been an answer into the Ahri? No. And I think a lot of this has come back towards Elramir, the amount of control they had in the early stages, invade onto the red buff at the initial spot, making sure that Lurox couldn't interact. And now Febi is behind as he runs away.
He runs away, Everfrost is good, has to flash the charm at the end. And that's just Kofte kind of saying, look, we just have so much CC, and you don't have enough dashes to get away from it all.
It's really awkward that if you've built up Merc Treads and you can't find enough of them. Oh, Lurox.
Yeah, they need to try and find something. SK Prime recognizing they're in a little bit of a bad situation, but they just can't right now. I think this play should have came out a little bit ago because you've got the Cyclone coming back out, and they want to take back this fight, the Istanbul Wildcats. But Elramir is going to go back in and immediately get deleted. You've got no ultimate here on Kofte as you get the teleports coming in. There's the Nautilus ultimate coming back off of cooldown. Kofte flashes away to make sure he doesn't go down. Danix cannot get himself away, and he goes down as well. This Ryze is shredding people, as is the Xayah, and it's a triple kill coming in here for the Ryze.
SK Prime got baited into that fight, but Genix didn't have ult. The Kennen TP'd into the middle of everyone and then had nothing left in the tank. Even Kofte went golden because he thought he had to avoid it, but it meant that SK Prime just didn't have the damage to follow up.
And particularly this Xayah, the feather pullback, just shredded health bars. Watch out for that as we come into this replay. Of course, talking about this, of course, there is no Kennen ultimate. And you don't have your LeBlanc bursting at that first target either to make things a little easier. Yeah, you take down the engage, but this is just a huge overextension beyond this point. Bao gets to walk up, seeing that there's very little threat left at that point. Parus is separated out the fight, and look how much work these feathers do. Keduii immediately taken out the fight.
The fact that Keduii got caught out there as well, it looked like SK Prime weren't really sure how they wanted to try and continue this one forward. Did they want to go in? Who was the target? Very messy from SK Prime, and Istanbul Wildcats happy to take that fight. 3-0-2 on destroying the top lane now. 2 kills for Bao. And with the the Baron up in just a few moments, Istanbul Wildcats going to start to drift their AD carry into mid, start trying to get control over this top side, and with all the outer shirts down, SK Prime going to see if they can look for a pick, find someone, but will they be spotted? I don't think they were.
They know there's going to be definitely multiple members there because you get a blue trinket and you saw Lurox there on the side, but without any real damage being done to these towers early, they're so damn healthy, and it means that these kind of overloading of a side lane doesn't really gain you a lot, and now you can see the Ryze kind of split pushing on the side lane. Istanbul Wildcats are very happy with this.
They absolutely are, because they've been actually fairly patient when they've had these phases of the game where they're happy with their lanes are, happy with where the vision is. They haven't been over-forcing in a way that SK Prime kind of always do, regardless of whether they have the advantage or not. They look for these fights, they do, and they're very good at playing them out from an advantage, but they don't have that same advantage from that game one. Now if they overforce and they make a mistake, that's Baron gone with it. They need to be very, very careful about how they approach the next minute or two.
Look, 6,000 gold lead. I think for SK Prime, you gotta hope and pray you can maybe catch somebody out with the Slicing Maelstrom. You've got the flashback up for Genax, so he is going to be a little bit more of an instant threat in that regard. But 2 items completed for the AD carry of Istanbul Wildcats, 2 items for the Ryze, 2 items for the Ahri, and it's a Banshees as well for Kofte. So it's making him such a harder target to just kind of catch in those side lanes, which means he's very happy, much like the Ryze, to catch up all these waves.
Lurox just gonna love that from Elramir at that point, but absolutely, I think you're absolutely right to hit on the itemization from Kofte at that point. When you have so many very high mobility burst champions, LeBlanc, Lee Sin, even something like that, Zeri, right? When you've now had to dip into Merc Treads for FEBIVEN and you're going against that Banshees on the other side, you're not really going to get that solo kill or even poke opportunity at that point. Makes your job a lot harder as this LeBlanc.
That's a 3-level difference between the mid and jungle as well for Lurox, so does not want to take a 1v1, and Bao is there as well, so they could just go on this immediately. There's an exhaust for Kofte. Doesn't want to use it just yet, but you could imagine he wants to try and keep it if the Kennen does show its face.
Yeah, I mean, the opportunity for Istanbul Wildcats is here to immediately try and make a play on top side. Genax reset, so there's no real opportunity of any sort of cross map or any real pressure on the map, and I think that's the biggest fault for SK Prime at the moment, is that they're not really getting in a position to counteract a play like this.
Elramir was push in onto Keduii, but recognized that there was a Braum and a Kennen there, so doesn't want to overcommit to the play with an exhaust available to Kofte. I mean, this Kennen just loses so much of its value as well, and you got 3 items now on the story. He's picked up in a Zhonya's Hourglass, but it looks like SK Prime maybe looking to try and go for a little bit of a trade map on the side there. They need to go for something.
Let's try and find something, because this is a looming soul point coming out from the Wildcats. They're going to solo it out, or rather not solo it out. They got the Xayah and the Ryze down there. They had a teleport from Destroy should anything start to emerge on that top side. But again, this is why it's quite hard for SK Prime to make aggressive plays, even when they've got members missing to it. Wildcats, the remaining members on top side, very hard to pick.
I mean, realistically, though, they could have gone for some sort of dive in that top lane. They could have done something on the top side, right? The fact that you don't even commit Keduii up to that top lane so you can actually threaten a dive or at least get that top lane turret is a bit of a mistake from SK Prime here. And now, Destroy, he's set up again in the side lane. Gen X can't really try and contest. Febi can't really contest them either. You just don't really have the wave clear. And Istanbul Wildcats, the second you end up drifting members down to deal with Destroy, but they clear out your vision around Baron. They'll make sure that they're getting themselves set up, and they'll continue to look for these picks.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Dag, that really was the timing for the play just before the setup, because now you're going to be in a bit of a chokehold. You've got 3 items on this Ryze, including a Zhonya's, which, yeah, you can't do the ult Zhonya's combo like you used to, but it still buys you so much time. You're going to have to call down a lot of members to deal with Destroy. Feels like SK Prime in a very difficult position. They don't necessarily have all of the go buttons they'd like. They don't have an engaged support. They don't have the Nautilus themselves, but they've got to find a play somehow.
It's 2,500 gold between the top laners right now. Gen X just really hoping that nothing happens before he can find that second item, before he can really kind of be a threat on these side lanes, but it's just not happening right now for the SK Prime top laner. And Istanbul Wildcats, they're slow, they're steady, they're methodical, they're precise, and they're just chipping everything down. You're looking for a pick, but you're on top of a ward, and now everyone's got to get out of their own jungle because they realize, hey, we're actually not at an advantage.
It is interesting to see this different style from Istanbul Wildcats. Is Kofte.
As the Banshee's very happy to kind of move on, that doesn't even use his ult.
Traditionally, though, when you think of Istanbul Wildcats, it's, you know, dragon fights, working it through a 5v5, letting Bao take over, but Keduii going to have to be the one that steps away. But instead, now they're just looking for picks. They're trying to play a very different style here, and it's working.
I mean, they got the Ghost and the Flash there out of Keduii, so that's being, again, just 2 things, and this is all happening while Destroy is still pushing in on that bot side. Finally, the Void Staff comes in here for Gen X, but I don't think it's not really going to do a lot, and this is just being SK Prime getting suffocated. Finally, they go for something, but you've got the Feather Storm, so you're able to fly back off of that. Keduii trying to see if he can do something, but without his summoners, he's very muted. There's a good exhaust coming out of that one here. Glacial Fissure to try and separate everybody. Act the flash in, but everybody just flashes away. Yes, you get the Wukong, but what else can you get? That's a lot of damage. And they get anything more on the Bao? That's the question. Yes, they can, but you trade back your 80 carries. Triple kill comes in for Bao just before he dies.
The play comes too late. It comes into a very well-defended Xayah of Bao, and Bao rips them apart again. Does go down, don't get me wrong. At least SK gets something from that, but the timing was awkward, and they can't land a knockout blow.
I think SK Prime had to go for something, though. They're just slowly bleeding out, and they knew the Wukong ultimate was down. Parus had backed away. They thought maybe that was the chance, but as you see, Bao, quick on the fingers, manages to get himself out of harm's way, even burning the flash on towards Lurox. The exhaust onto Keduii as well means there's just not enough damage, and Destroy marking Gen X for so much of this buys a ton of space here. Even a great charm from Kofte just to buy a little bit more time, so they will get a second back with Keduii getting Bao, but it ends up being a 2 for 3.
See how much damage, or at least the amount of threat which Destroy has. He basically wasn't in that fight, even though SK Prime managed to commit most of their members towards it. Did feel like if Destroy was there for any extended amount of time, that damage profile goes very much against them.
Minute and a half now until Dragon, though, and Istanbul Wildcats still just going back to their old ways. They can say, hey, look, we're going to clear out vision, we're going to start to slowly creep this forward, and now we don't have flash on Gen X, Lurox, Febi, Keduii. The only person on SK Prime that has that flash available is going to be Prime, and at least when you look at the rest of Istanbul Wildcats, they have a lot of built-in self-peel, so they don't have to worry as much, and that's all going to be up and available as long as they don't overextend for this next solo fight.
Well, TP going to be coming in from the Ahri after clearing that wave on top lane. Elramir finds himself on the backside once more. They do try and separate him out, but you just got no summoners. Finally, Gen X gets in. They do take out Kofte, but the Keduii is down. Double kill comes in here for the Ryze, and Destroy does exactly as his namesake will tell you. He is destroying these backlines.
And Keduii is caught away from a wall, even with the knockups potentially interrupting something like that Spark Surge. Not able to get over any terrain, gets caught out in the middle of the lane. Wildcats pounce. They're going to take themselves a big objective in this game too.
Well, they got vision here. Look at FEBIVEN trying to just do something against Destroy right now, but the phase rush keeps him so healthy and just putting down so much damage here. FEBIVEN trying to see if he can just keep away this Ryze, but maybe they can go for it. But the lifeline's doing so much for him as well. So this is just, again, just something you can't really go for. You need a miracle right now if you're SK Prime.
Can Lurox get in? It's getting low. It's gone. Not quite there. Istanbul Wildcats happy with that. Quick reset for the soul fight, but that actually might give the opportunity for SK Prime to steal that away.
Potentially could, but it doesn't change the fact that they're in an awful state in this game. We talked about how The Wildcats, they take a game to wake up. Maybe we thought that SK Prime, they could do away with that one. But if they picked up all these electric-type champions, the Kennen, the Zeri, it feels like the Wildcats have grounded themselves. Very happy to just absorb that power.
Elramir has been so good on this Wukong, though, consistently finding moments where Keduii is overextended, going in with the invisibility, playing around the vision that SK Prime have set up, and looking for that play. Now, though, Febi trying to mark everyone that saw in Istanbul Wildcats as they start to come in. No ult on bound, no flash available. Can he do something?
10 seconds till that ult's available. The Feather Storm going to be absolutely massive. They do finally spot that ward in the pit, but here we go. They're going to go for a full fight. Keduii finally gets himself over, but the flash from Elramir means he's still there and available. Genex tries to move forward. The Braum is dead, and they're going to try and jump on about. Feather Storm does go up, and that means the Kennen cannot finish the job. Destroy going into a 1v1 here, and the Zeri cannot survive. It's a clean 5 for nothing. Not quite sure where that round warp was going, but Destroy does not care, because that's going to be game 2 over to the Istanbul Wildcats.
SK Prime fall to Istanbul Wildcats. The Dragon is picked up. Bao nearly went down, but with 7 kills on Destroy, the Rabadon's death cap. There's too many threats on this team.
This series is oh so important to the Prime League, to SK Prime, but it is also such a feather in the cap for the Wildcats, for the TCL in their first semi-finals, their first split of EMEA Masters.
We got ourselves a series. 1-1 in the best of 5. Don't you shake your head disapprovingly at me.
You know what you've done.
I know, and that's, you know what? It's part of the play-by-play's code, all right? It's a code of standards, it's a code of ethics, and you must say we have a series, because guess what we have? A series 1-1.
I knew that at the start of the day, but I'm glad it's turned into a good one. 1-1 at the moment. Istanbul Wildcats, fantastic job. The fact that they managed to control that from start to finish, playing through the strong main jungle. Elramir looking fantastic on this Wukong. Really big shout out to him for how much he controlled this game.
And I think I really want to hark back to the wording which Jamadi used on desk as well. It's the download. It's the download of it, because it feels like they were just inside SK Prime's heads a lot more than that first game, where it felt like, you know, Lurox was getting the edge over in that jungle match. It felt like Destroy was also getting really kind of brought down to size by Jedax as well. You could not have convinced me at that point that the nameplates were the same as game 1.
Yeah, I mean, it really did feel like 2 different teams. Again, like you said, turn the nameplates off, that could have just been a completely different matchup there for them. And again, the game 1, SK Prime got a good kill up around that top side. They got double kill, actually, and that kind of ignited the snowball. That was for them to kind of go, right, we're ahead on summoners, we got these different things. We never got that this game.
I think it's 2 things. It's a case of not having push in bot lane to unlock Prime. It's going to be pretty big. I think with the Zeri has kind of been unlocked, or well, should be locked down with this Xayah pick, and then looking at the mid lane as well, trying to get a better matchup. If that's the case, maybe we can see the bounce back here.
Well, we'll see. There's a bit of a bounce back, but we'll send it back over to Laura and our analyst to tell us if there's a little bit more we're missing.
Thank you, thank you. SK Prime downloaded, Wildcats activated Trouble, and this is what we've been saying after the first game, and here it was a way cleaner game on their side, but also more tools to do so.
Yeah, a little bit of a whoopsie. Game 1 happens.
Yeah,
Drafts can't always be great, but it feels like Wildcats have a blueprint. First game we lose, second game, patience. We're playing slow, we're playing for scaling, we're playing around objectives, and we know that SK Prime is going to make the same mistake, which is overextend to catch someone, try a fight without using the proper waves, and Wildcats, with their patience, took the team fights to their own advantage by SK Prime not setting up properly.
Yeah, I just feel like SK Prime in this game kind of muted just because Wildcats just had control of the pacing of the game, right? And I think when you've got the combination that you have on the side of SK Prime, where you've got Lee Sin, you've got the LeBlanc, you want to be controlling the tempo of the game. And also, we were mentioning it was the Braum last pick into the Nautilus. If you've got that combination or that strong support matchup, great, fantastic, but it has to be utilized. In the 2v2, it couldn't be utilized. You would then expect it to be utilized by the LeBlanc, by the Lee Sin. And they never really moved out of the map from the early game. I think a lot of that more to do actually with Elramir's movements on the map.
I think we have a perfect example of why they couldn't move for that early game, right?
Exactly.
Because the early game was shut down by Elramir. It feels like Wukong has been dominating this series so far. Elramir with a fantastic invade through the top side, because that's where his prio was lying with Destroy. He'll set down his vision, he spots Lurox, and after Lurox had used his spells, this is where he's gonna go in to take the trade. You'll see that Elramir steals away the red buff. Lurox has to walk out of his jungle jungle, and he doesn't stop there because top lane Prio, look, there's 2 huge waves pushing into Genax. Genax cannot leave tower, which means Lurox is all alone having to deal with a red buffed Wukong.
Yeah, and you know, I actually just realized in the replay, the reason why Febi doesn't end up moving is because he half moves. He starts to move, he recognizes the invader's finished, but in that small window, that's what he thinks it's finished, right? And in that small window, the Ahri actually manages to push the wave back out, which locks him back into having to remain in the mid lane, which means Elramir gets not only the Crux, but then additionally the Raptors on top of it.
Definitely had his phone number here, but we saw at the end of the play, it doesn't stop here because Lurox is going to try to find opportunities on the top lane, but when you're in this situation as Lee Sin in trouble, it gets really complicated to find your way back and bounce back.
Absolutely, because you play on creating these early game plays with Lee Sin, but you've been spotted. After Elramir takes the top side jungle, where do you think Lee Sin is going to go? He's going to back and move towards the bot side of the map. He doesn't have a play top because the wave is pushing, only towards his bot lane. It's very telegraphed. You're going to get shut down, and I feel like Lurox was spotted throughout the entirety of the game and not allowed to make his early game plays that make SK snowball.
And we've talked about this during the previous game, the fact that SK and the way they approach macro when they're not ahead, usually it's hard for them to bounce back and find their way back into the game. And here, Trouble and Jamada, we have a play actually that we can show here when they want to try and get ready for the Drake, not even checking vision, not even checking where the opponent is, and it backfires horribly.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, it's just... Yeah, it's the whole like one wave, trying to achieve everything on one wave thing that you've been talking about, Trouble, for a lot of the day, where it's just a bit greedy. And in this case, that small window of Keduii being a little bit further behind the rest of his team is enough for Wildcats to pounce and punish because they're trying to get everything out of the cookie jar in one swipe.
But it gets a little bit worse because it's usually like they're trying to do everything in one wave. They didn't have a wave right there.
Yeah.
The wave state was absolutely neutral in the mid lane, which means they tried to create a rotation, cut someone off guard, team fight, and take the objective on no wave, on no vision control. And of course, this team fight was pretty much the nail in the coffin because at about that point, they were about 10k ahead for the side of Wildcats. But what an absolute turnaround. Again, slow and steady, wins the race. You take the 2 primary tools from the side of SK Prime, the Wukong, the Ahri, make the plays yourself in the early game with the Wukong, and then you allow your 2 carries, top lane and bot, to snowball the mid to late fights.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like, again, when you've got the Wukong and the Ahri and you're allowed to be more proactive than the enemy, and in this case, it's LeBlanc Lee Sin, like, I can't think of another combo in the game mid-jungle side that wants to be more proactive than this duo.
Syndrome Xayah, back in season 5.
Oh no. Horrible times.
Very, very bad times, by the way, everybody. But like for me, it just feels really difficult, right? For SK, as soon as the game gets slowed down, they then also lack hard engage tools because this combination needs to be ahead, right? So when you're then put on the back foot, it's like, okay, where can we look? You try to look on sides, well, destroys 2 items at 18 minutes. You can't kill that guy anymore. You try to, you know, play on a side lane again, but this time it's the Ahri who's got 3 dashes and a flash maybe. So it just never really feels like a feasible way to play the game once you fall behind. And in this case, I feel like Wildcats, you know, you said earlier they had their number, and they really did kind of had a good read where as soon as Elramir basically kind of shut Lurox out of the early game, that was it. There was no realistic way back in.
Beautifully done. And even if the draft, I think, was not decisive precisely in this game, still a lot of creativity on the side of the Wildcats, especially Destroy here with his champion pool. And I know that it's something we saw in the LEC on Twitter when we saw that these AP champions were coming back on the top lane. I'm thinking of Kennen especially. You want to be able to think outside the box and play this kind of champion. And Ryze here, I think, was the perfect choice for it.
Yeah, well, me and Jamada looked at each other and we're like, why didn't you do this in game 1?
Yeah.
Like, if you had the perfect, you know, ace up your sleeve versus the Kennen, who was also blind pick, why didn't you just go for it? And I feel like this time the Ryze did so well in lane, all alone, barely had any assistance from jungle because Elramir was too busy 1v1 in Lurox in the jungle. So 1v1, I think it was 80 minutes in, 2.5k up at some point on this Ryze. And yes, you don't have necessarily a proper front line on the side of Wildcats, but this Ryze becomes your front line. He gets so tanky. Rod of Ages stacks are a huge thing for the champion. And with the shields that he gets, the mobility through his runes as well, he can become a huge problem in the front line.
It just felt like a bit of a strange choice for me from the side of SK Prime to go Kennen on 4. Not because Kennen is weak, because Kennen is not weak, guys. Spoiler alert.
He's be-winnable.
he's pretty much
Yeah.
first pickable. But I think when you know Destroyer is likely going to have something ready for it, and also the fact that Gen X, again, we'll go back to this point, Gen X said he's got picks ready for whatever
Give him the
Destroyer.
R5.
Exactly. So it feels a bit weird when there's definitely blind pickable supports. You know, you can go someone like Thresh. Sure, is it necessarily, you know, the best duo of Zeri? No, but it at the very least works with the LeBlanc Lee Sin, plus it works as Denial. If you run into Nautilus, sure, sucks. You could even go arguably Renata as well. Renata Zeri, very strong combo in the bot lane. So it just felt a little bit weird to not give over
Yeah.
the prio for R5. Sure, you're securing a strong pick, but then you're enabling what is a very strong and often a secondary carry and Destroyer in the top side for Wildcats.
And tying up your own hands, basically. I
Yeah.
think putting yourself in a difficult situation. Game 3, reset. What do we want to see? SK is back on the blue side, of course, as they
As it
as
always
it was
goes.
expected here. But what kinds of pick do you want to prioritize here in order to come back and get this much points?
You know what's been really mind-blowing on blue side? That both teams have been able to get Wukong and Ahri.
Yep.
When on blue side, you only get one pick first, and then you have
Yeah.
counter pick on the other side. So I'm expecting to see Wukong and Ahri just separated completely. Either separated or one of the two banned. Potentially the Wukong being banned away, and we see things like the Lissandra being a reply into the Ahri. A lot of heavy CC towards that mid-jungle duo. So I'm either expecting the Wukong or the Ahri banned, or at least split apart.
Yeah, it has to be the split. I think if you're on red side here, you heavily consider the Wukong ban now. I think, you know, throwing away a ban towards the Ahri doesn't really feel good. And
Yeah.
blind picking it into Wukong when you know the Lissandra answer can come in, it just sucks. So I think your hands are probably tied here, unless you feel like you have an answer, which, I mean, sure, maybe you do. I feel like maybe the Wildcats could willingly throw in actually the reverse matchup, take the Lee Sin on there, and then maybe look for the Lissandra on 3. You know, go something like Lee plus AD carry, whatever it may be, and then try and play through that. Other than that, yeah, I feel like the Wukong and the Ahri, they have to be split apart. At the bare minimum, I think that's the mentality that these teams have to come in with, or rather, Wildcats have to come in with on the red side.
Absolutely. And see if any creative picks can come up on both this team. 1-1 in this best of 5 semifinals right now. We'll see right after the break who gets to match points. See you soon.